My name is Curtis Cunningham. I was in the Navy for 4 years from 2011 to 2015. I'm a senior here at GU and I'm studying criminal justice and sociology, and I'm from Compton, California.
My name is Leah Flint, and I was in the United States Coast Guard as operations specialist. I currently live in Spokane, Washington because my husband is the ROTC instructor for the Gonzaga Bulldog Battalion. So I'm a military spouse as well. I'm from Asheboro, North Carolina, if you couldn't tell. And I'm currently going to school to get my bachelor's degree in education, administration, and counseling.
John Lipke, United States Air Force retired, 26 years in aerospace maintenance. And I'm here as to finish an undergraduate, full-time undergraduate, to finish my Bachelor of Business Administration degree. And I'm from Michigan, so I might have a little bit of an accent. You can pick those up a little bit. What do I want to do when I get older?
Yeah. What are you going to do when you grow up?
I'm not sure what I want to do when I grow up. Yeah, here to finish the bachelor's degree, and hopefully we'll go on and finish my graduate degree also.
So initially I actually chose the Air Force, but they denied me due to my tattoos. They're very strict on that stuff. So I literally went next door to the Navy and they accepted me. So that's why.
I joined the Coast Guard because my grandfather was in the Coast Guard and I wanted to follow in his footsteps, and what better place to be than on the water.
Very similar for me also. My father was in the Air Force from 1960 to 1964. He did some work in Germany, working on radar systems, and that he always told me stories about that, so I like that. I wanted to do the same.
Taken from being one person to being a team and having to figure out how to work with each other and get your mission done as a team and not as just one person. I learned how horrible it was to hold a bottle of water over your head for 2 hours at a time and enjoyed every minute of it.
So I went to basic training in Great Lakes, Illinois, which is right outside of Chicago. I was there in the winter as well, and it was freezing. You basically learn the same thing in all boot camps, teamwork. They preach attention to detail a lot, because basically, even though your job might not be as dangerous as someone else's, they all come together for the same mission.
Can any of y'all tell me about barracks or the bus, when you first have to get on the bus? What is, you kind of get videos about this.
I'll go. You stay in a hotel the night before you leave, and a bus comes and picks everyone up. You have to stay by yourself, no one can be there. And so when the bus comes, you go to MEPS, the bus comes, and my mom literally followed me on the bus. Literally followed me on the bus and didn't want me to go, which is funny. But, I was actually sick the night before, so I was just down in Pepto-Bismol on the plane and on the way there. So I don't know. I wasn't really nervous. I was more anxious to, get the first week over, because you hear about the first week and how everyone's going to be yelling at you and screaming. And you're not going to sleep a lot. So.
I stayed the night in the hotel, just like Curtis, and then you go to the MEP station the next day and you leave. We were supposed to leave, but there was a nor'easter coming through or something, and you couldn't get, all flights were delayed. So I was the only one going to Coast Guard Basic, so I was delayed. And we went back to the hotel, stayed another night, went back to the MEP station, eventually got to basic training 2 days late. Got on the bus, got to Cape May, New Jersey, and the drill sergeant comes on the bus, and somehow it was our fault that our plane was delayed. And we proceeded to do push-ups and sit-ups for the entire day before we could even go into our barracks. So that was my introduction to Coast Guard basic training.
And she said she enjoyed every bit of it.
I did.
I remember very little about basic training. I tried to block it out. It was a stressful event. I remember getting off the bus, it being cold in Lackland Air Force Base, which it's not supposed to be in the winter, and immediately the screaming began. And so they had us all in formation, and I remember the word rainbow. Did you guys experience that? They called us rainbows. I remember that.
No.
Just because we were all in our civilian clothes and everyone had all different colors on it. So they tried to kind of indoctrinate us from the very second you step off the bus, set the tone, right?
Strip you of your name.
Yes.
Yeah.
You were a thing, not a person. I kind of break it down this way: blue collar, white collar. White collar is officer. Blue collar is mostly worker, enlisted type people or workers.
I agree with that. I think enlisted is more of the labor force,
Sure.
and officers are more the admin.
And how do you become an officer or enlisted?
So to become an officer, you have to basically have a bachelor's degree in anything. So as long as you have a bachelor's degree, there's a couple different routes you can take. So you can actually start enlisted and go officer, and those programs vary throughout different branches about when you can do that. And but you can also just go in after you graduate college by just speaking with the recruiter and choosing the designation and going to officer candidate school. And you can also do ROTC. That's another way to become an officer.
And then there's one more. There's the branch service. There's the branch academies also.
Yeah.
You can kind of come through.
Yeah.
And those are about the three main ways. ROTC, all that stuff also.
So does that mean, is all the management officers, or are there enlisted management people too? Like, who supervises the?
There's so basically enlisted supervises those that have higher rank, enlisted rank. They supervise the lower rank, and the officer is just basically there to oversee everything. From my experience.
Yeah, I think as you make rank on the enlisted side of things, you slowly transition over to more of a management type position. But when you first initially enter the military as an E1 or an E2, whatever you come out of basic as, you are the labor force, and then you work to get promoted and become more on par with officers as you reach, E7, E8, or E9, the top of the enlisted ranks.
I was in the Navy. I was stationed on a carrier, and we deployed about a month after I arrived to the ship. And so a Navy deployment, it basically consists of patrolling international waters, or if we're at war and you're on a carrier, you might be conducting air operations. We were there 9 months. They're supposed to be 9 months, but they never. It will never be that short. It usually goes to about 11, and you get a break. So with the carrier, you can't dock often because it's nuclear, and a lot of people don't want that close to their cities. So we stopped at a port on average about once a month. You get 4 days off, and of those 4 days, you have to work 1. So that's what our deployments consist of.
For the Coast Guard, it varies. Their deployments range from 30 to 60 days, and the type of deployment varies based on what your job is in the Coast Guard. So you have icebreakers, they're in the Arctic Circle, so they deploy for 60 days, breaking up the ice in the Arctic Circle so boats can make it through. The Coast Guard does in fact deploy to all war zones, so you can deploy to a war zone, it just depends on your job. And then speaking from an Army perspective, they can deploy from anywhere from 9 months to all the way to 18 months, although those are few and far between anymore. And they're usually into combat zones or peacekeeping missions, like after the Haiti earthquake, they came in and kind of helped the town rebuild, or coming into places like Bosnia or any of those places for peacekeeping initiatives, or training other countries.
Average Air Force deployment, 4 to 6 months usually. And you're working 6-day work weeks with 1 day off. those are 12-hour days, and those usually get stretched out to 14 or 15, depending on travel back and forth between the airfield that you're working on and where you're being billeted. And those billets can look anything like anything from a tent to a dormitory type event, and then there's usually what we call a chow hall or a dining facility, and you eat out of that, and then 4 to 6 months usually.
So for the Army, you can be stationed at Oconus, which is outside the continental United States, and that includes Alaska, Hawaii, Germany, Japan, any of those military installations, and they're not considered deployments. You are stationed at that installation for however long you're required to be there. You're not getting combat pay, you're not getting hazard duty pay, any of those things. Your family can come with you. So as a deployment, you're going into an area where your family cannot go. Usually there is not a military base there, if it's Army, or you're out on your ship if you're Navy or Coast Guard, patrolling the waters, and so you don't have your family with you. You don't have to take your family. You can do assignments where your family doesn't go and they stay behind. But
in the Navy, I think a lot of people think that when we're not deployed, we're on base, and that's not true. So even though I was only deployed for 9 months, I probably spent about a total of 3 years out of my 4 out to sea. So there's a lot of training. You'll hear that word a lot. You'll do a lot of that. So pilots have to keep up with quals and things of that nature. And it's basically just staying ready in the event that anything happens.
One of the big differences in the Air Force between that and like Army units that we always compare ourselves to also is we're deployed maintaining fully operational airfields, and then we come home to our bases or our PCS bases and we maintain fully operational airfields and air operations at both locations. So we're working deployed, we're working home. We're not really standing down or doing any training. We have to figure out ways to train as you go. And an operational environment is really challenging for us.
Can you be deployed within the continental U.S.? Or is deployment mean by definition outside of the U.S.?
if you're in the National Guard, you can be caught up, and that's considered a deployment where you would go, like when they came in for Hurricane Katrina, those National Guard soldiers were activated and deployed to New Orleans to help in the recovery efforts.
Yeah. So in the Navy, definitely have to reach international waters to be considered a deployment. Anything else would just be considered an underway, which is basically training.
So for the Coast Guard, a lot of people think we're not actually military because we don't fall under the Department of Defense. We fall under the Department of Homeland Security. But we are in fact military. We do in fact go to basic training just like all other branches of the military, and we receive our pay through similar finances. So we are a military branch, and we do go through basic, and yes, we are considered puddle pirates because they don't think that we go out into international waters like the Navy. We stay where it's shallow, and that we don't go to war zones. But in fact, the Coast Guard has been to every war that the United States has participated in since 1790.
So in the Navy, I think a lot of people think that we're all sailors. That's not true. There is an aviation side to every branch, and I actually worked the aviation side of the Navy, and you're considered an airman at that point, which I know people could confuse that with the Air Force, but that's just how it is.
And in the Air Force, we are all airmen also, so we don't differentiate between that. But one of the myths I usually get all the time is, what do you fly? What are you the pilot of? So everyone in the Air Force is a pilot.
Yeah.
After a while, you just kind of go with it, and you kind of develop a story about, hey, what do you fly? Well, I fly this. But there's much more to it than that.
And I think a lot of times at the Coast Guard, people think that one of your biggest things you're doing is catching drug runners like if you're in the Coast Guard, that's what you do is you catch drug runners, and that's not always the case.
I think there's tons of different reasons why people join the military. I was the first person in my family to join the military, and it wasn't because I was super patriotic or anything like that. I simply just needed a start on life, and I thought that, you know, this would help me. I never thought I'd be in college. I was a horrible high school student, so I never thought I'd be here, but I don't regret anything. I'm definitely happy that I joined.
I think a lot of people think you joined the military because you didn't have any other option, or that you come from a poor family, or you had a hard life as a child, like you were brought up hard or whatever. And you know, people join for various reasons. That's not why I joined. I just, like Curtis, I needed somewhere to start. Like, you know, I didn't go to college right out of high school, and I figured, well, why not? They'll pay me, so, you know, easy in.
Yeah, for me, it was all about opportunity. I think Curtis and I are the same person, only I was in the Air Force. And it certainly had a lot of opportunities. You can go to school while you're in, tuition assistance. We're going to take care of you medically. And the reason should be to support your country, but that's just part of the reason. Mm-hmm. And it's a great thing to serve your country and have all those opportunities at the same time. Of course, for 26 years, so the training that I'm using right now as a new transfer student is time management, which is a big one, and prioritization. I had to do that on a constant basis, right up into the day that I left. And you learn those things over time, and it's definitely paying off here at Gonzaga.
Yeah, I would agree with John. Prioritization is a big one because, you know, just like here, you're bombarded with assignments, and you kind of have to get through it somehow, some way, and you have to pick one and knock it out. And that's just like it is in the military when you're given a job. They're not going to wait till that job's done to give you another one. So just gotta get it done the best way you can. That if we have questions about anything, to keep the response very black and white. Like, we're not used to, you know, getting the runaround, or a lot of the times we're not even used to, you know, asking people about things, because usually in the military, if you know, ask your superior like how to do this and how to do that after you've already had the training, you know, they're just going to tell you to just get it done. They're not going to tell you how. You know, it's all written there in front of you. You know, everything's there. Follow it step by step, and that's just not the case in the civilian world. So,
for me, the biggest thing would be to understand that everybody's transition out of the military, well, not everybody's, but some people's transition out of the military was not very good. So for me, I didn't want to be out of the military, so it took me a very long time to even talk about the fact that I was in. So understanding that if you do find out that somebody was in the military, let that be enough. Like, let them in their time tell their story and get their story to you. Don't, you know, poke around and ask questions because they may not be comfortable talking about it. And then the second thing, as a military spouse, understand that there are family members and dependents of military members on campus, and that they also have different needs than a civilian person would have. They could have a spouse that's deployed to a combat zone, or they could be a Gold Star family, which is somebody's been killed in action in combat. So just understand that they have different situations as well, based on their family member who has served.
Yeah, right away, I don't feel like I'm a typical student, and I think one of the things that I felt here as a new transition student is that I'm playing a lot of catch up here. Students like the junior level transferred in, military person, so I have some things I can do. I'm good at prioritizing, I'm good at time management, and I have some things that I can't do. Don't know where a whole lot of things are, don't know the way of life here, and kind of blending in. I think if they kind of understand that we're having to adapt to this culture, and this is a culture here at Gonzaga, and we can make the transition relatively quickly, but we might need some help to figure out what that is and to give us that time also to make that transition.
So first of all, I would like to say thank you because you guys are a big help, and I understand that you guys are trying to become a veteran-friendly school, and I know it's a transition for you just as much as it is for us coming into school. So I would like to say thank you for all you've done.
For me, I forgot to mention that I'm the Vet Corps Navigator here at Gonzaga University. So I am placed on campus through the Washington Department of Veterans Affairs to help veterans transition from military life to college life. And while the person who is in this position changes regularly, don't forget that you have a Vet Corps Navigator on campus who can help you with anything on Gonzaga's campus and anything in the VA.
I like to say that when I was looking around, shopping around for schools for my GI Bill, I immediately fell in love with Gonzaga because it has a lot of the same qualities as the military. There's lots of support for you here. It's a family environment. I feel like I'm part of something here. That attracted to me to Gonzaga right away. So I'm looking forward and I'm very excited to be here.